Good evening, councillors. Oh, I'm a bit loud. Hang on a second. Let's turn that down a bit. Good evening, councillors. I'm Councillor Stuart Jeffrey, leader of the council, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the cabinet. Good evening, councillors. There's a slight delay in the playback there. Thank you. May I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, please can you let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but to merely ensure that members of the public in the room know that it's taking place. Item 1, apologies for absence. I haven't received any, and I can see all the cabinet here. Item 2, urgent items. There are none. Item 3, notification of visiting members. We have a couple. Would you like to come and introduce yourselves?
Councillor Russell for item 18.
Councillor Greenham, just observing.
Thank you both. Item 4, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures? No. Item 5, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? I've been lobbied on items 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20. I picked up enough lobbying for the whole cabinet by the sounds of it. Item 6, to consider whether items are taken in private. I move that all items be taken in public. Is that agreed? Item 7, minutes of the meeting on the 18th of September. I move that those minutes are approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Item 8 is presentation of petitions. I have none presented. Item 9, questions from local residents to the leader or individual members. I have no questions to any of us. Item 10, questions from members to the leader or individual cabinet members. There are none. Item 11, matters referred to the cabinet by another committee. There are none. Item 12, issues arising from overview and scrutiny. There are none. Item 13, matters referred to the cabinet by any other committee. There are none. Item 14, matters relating to serious service failure or nuisance. There are none. Item 15, receipt of written representations from members of the council. There are none. Okay, item 16, cabinet forward plan. Do any members have comments on the forward plan? Okay.
Hi members, I just wanted to quickly clarify, if you look on page 18 of the forward plan, Kent Farmers, Growers and the wider Maidstone food and drink industry motion, the lead member is incorrectly labelled as the cabinet member for planning, policy and management. That should read the cabinet member for healthier, stronger communities. Thank you.
No comments on other than that? Okay, is that forward plan noted? Right, item 17. This is the council actions in response to the full council's motion on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Angela, you're going to speak on this, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So as Cabinet will be aware, the motion at Appendix 1, which is page 30 of your papers, came forward at the last meeting of Council and was sent without debate to the Cabinet for consideration. The motion as is within the Council's budget and policy framework, and the report does set out the support currently provided, which would meet the motion as expressed if it's approved. If the Cabinet did want additional measures, we would need to bring back an additional report setting out the budget and policy implications ahead of the final decision on the motion. So just to clarify that bit of procedure.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's probably worth my speaking because I did agree to second the original motion to full council. I think the motion is perhaps not as direct as I'd like because of the scale of bloodshed in the region. However, I'm very aware that there were a lot of people involved in coming up with a set of words that were agreeable to people from a range of different traditions and backgrounds and perspectives. And I think it says basically what needs to be said. I have heard that perhaps it's not our place to get involved, but frankly, we're flying a Ukrainian flag on this building as we speak. The UK has had a very kind of significant role in the history of that part of the world, and that's actually one of the things I do like about the motion, that it does provide some historic context for what is going on today, which I think is useful to remind UK government sometimes of that fact. And I think it's worth mentioning again when we talk about this, what's it got to do with Maidstone? There is a real visceral upset within an awful lot of people, both those who have relatives and friends in the region, as do I know a number of us, but also those who are just seeing what's on their social media, seeing what's on the television, knowing that there is a large classroom full of children being killed every day. And if you look at what's happening in Baitla here and at Jabalia now, it's probably a couple of classrooms. So I think we need to stand up and be counted. And I'm reminded of the poem by James Baldwin, "The Every Bombed Village is My Hometown." And I think we just do need to show solidarity and at least make some sort of a statement as a council. So therefore, I would move that we do send the letter as set out, that we don't modify for all the reasons that were set out by officers, but we get it in now. And I know the only thing that really does sadden me is that I'd hope that when this was discussed at full council, that by now that the violence would have ended, but the violence actually has got worse and enveloped new parts of the region. So I think we just need to stand up and be counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Yes, I mean, your point is well made in terms of the impacts, the Ukrainian aspects. I mean, the impacts on residents are very, very clear. We have a lot of residents contacting all of us at various points. Many of us, as you say, have friends over in the region who are affected, and I can't imagine what it would be like to actually be living in that region while that genocide is underway. And you make the good point about Ukraine, clearly. Councillor English.
It's always a little difficult for local authorities in the UK or anywhere else when discussion turns to events that aren't directly within the remit of local authorities, particularly if those are foreign affairs. I remember many years ago, Maidstone Borough Council, before I was a councillor, had a rather animated discussion on the subject of Nicaragua. We nearly ended up twinning with community in Nicaragua, which would have been in an interesting twinning association. But so it is always a little. I know, and didn't he turn out to be a disappointment? And so it is always a little difficult, and judgment calls have to be made sometimes. What is clear is that there is an impact of this conflict, like the Ukrainian conflict, on many people who are resident long or short term in Maidstone. And in that sense, the council, in terms of its communities in Maidstone, has a degree of responsibility. I think the motion as it stands was the product of much hard work and consideration and trying to be constructive in the middle of these issues, rather than throwing additional paraffin on a fire that is already burning quite sufficiently. So I'm happy to have the motion unamended. I think, should there be a deterioration in the community relationships in Maidstone and further action needed to be taken, we can return to it. But it looks like that's not going to happen, which is good news. One of the few pieces of good news in relation to this particular issue. So I can't always ever use the word happy in this context. That would be inappropriate, but I do support the motion unamended at this time.
Thank you, Councillor English. I would suggest maybe that some of the points, particularly around the Red Cross and aid, may just need to be updated in line with more recent events, such as the removal of, or the vote against UNRWA being the obvious one. But I'm sure that's a minor textual amendment that we don't need to worry too much about, but thank you. So I have a proposer. Councillor, I saw Thompson first. Councillor Summersgill, are you seconding this? No, you're going to speak. So Councillor Thompson next.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is important that we are heard to respond to the thoughtful and professionally minded comments from some of our colleagues as to what the proper boundaries and responsibilities and remit of this council is. I'm minded to reinforce the last paragraph on page 30, that we condemn the increase in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic violence and abuse in the UK, and agrees that all forms of racism and prejudice have no place in Maidstone. This is an important contribution to community wellbeing in this immediate district. That is our responsibility. We are a global society. That we are not an island. I echo Councillor Harwood's comments about the history and our legacy responsibility in that regard. And thank you, Chair, for already mentioning the point that I was going to make on 31 at part 3 to allow the Red Cross. I was going to ask that we indeed perhaps amend that to something like or equivalent recognised institutions that are recognised by those in the area, those native to the park, because the principle that we should not be telling folk in these tragic situations what they should be doing, I think is sound, and there would be another way in which we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and let's not forget points 1 and 2 about making sure we have some focus around supporting directly supporting the residents who are affected. So that's helpful. Thank you. Councillor Summersgill.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise a question about the procedural motion where it was not discussed at council, full council. Are you happy that we've got consensus across the political divide, then when we don't have a discussion at full council and it's referred to one side, if you like, to the cabinet only?
Thank you. Clearly, I don't have confidence that we have political consensus. We haven't even had a vote in this room yet, so I don't know even if we have consensus in this room yet. I think your question is reasonable, and point is reasonable in terms of is there wider council sign up and a councillor sign up? Clearly, we are elected as a cabinet to make these kind of decisions. There wouldn't have been a vote at full council anyway because of the process of the constitution. However, there could have been a debate which would have been at least able to bring forward potentially different views. However, it was felt to be a little too contentious, I think, for that full debate to take place. So it kind of feels reasonable that we simply take that discussion on and make those decisions. But thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else indicating. Have I got a seconder for Clive? You want to speak again? No. So Clive's proposed that we take that motion as it sits and agree it. Is there a seconder for that? Oh, sorry. Did you propose it? You seconded it. Sorry, apologies. So it was proposed by Councillor Harwood, seconded by Councillor English. Is everybody in favour? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to ask for some clarification. During the course of your conversation debate, you indicated that there may be a need to update some of the content. You specifically made reference to organisations like the Red Cross, including UNRWA. So I wonder whether you just want to acknowledge you could make a small amendment here to allow the leader to give a more contemporaneous position so far as that is concerned. So I just wanted to make sure that you've got that covered. It's a minor tweak to the actions that were in the original motion. And my suggestion would be that it relates particularly to a little 3. I just wanted to suggest that you incorporated that because it reflected your earlier debate.
Thank you.
I'm quite happy to do so.
You're happy. Councillor Harwood, are you happy, I'm assuming? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, are we all happy? Okay, is that agreed? Thank you. So let's move on to item 18, annualised garden waste subscriptions. Councillor Russell, I note you want to speak on this. Jen, are you introducing the report or is it Clive?
I'm quite happy to have a brief canter through this. As the report has already been to the Policy Advisory Committee, where I briefly presented it. We have an opportunity to move to a more regulated and logical system for our garden waste. We are struggling sometimes with the fact that because of a rolling date of renewals, it can actually be quite hard to know when someone is due for renewal and to manage the system. This is a bit of a problem, particularly if there is an issue of the contract had to be extended. So what we see on the papers in front of you is 3 options for moving from a rolling subscription basis for the garden waste bins to an annualised subscription basis. So which we feel will give the council a much firmer grip on the handling of the service. The preferred option is option 1, which will allow more accurate monitoring and replacement of bins should any of them go missing. We're taking the opportunity, if this is approved, to upgrade the technologies and to take advantage of technological improvements, so that we will be issuing annually a permit which will make it clear to the collection crews who's paid for a bin and collection and who hasn't. Now, obviously, there will still be people who want to have an extra bin or move house and have to either give up a subscription or get a new subscription pro rata, and that option will continue. So we're fairly confident that this proposal represents a sound way of making what has occasionally this last year been a little bumpy service into a much easier service to manage and to deliver for the general public, and which will give more information to the council and the contractor in handling the service. So I'm recommending that we go with option 1 in the report.
Thank you, Councillor English. Thank you. Councillor Russell, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't really intending to speak on this tonight, but I obviously read the Cabinet agenda cover to cover, and I'm a bit confused. I'm confused because from what it says in 2.10, paragraph 2.10, nothing's changed. So presumably the old contract, they were collecting these amount of garden waste bins, and then the new contract, they're collecting the same amount of garden waste bins. Yes, because people have been reporting missed collections that they found out they didn't have an account. So great, we've raised a bit of cash there because we've got new subscribers, but they're not new bins. So presumably they were already collecting the bins and now they're still collecting the bins. And although nothing's changed, apparently we're now not collecting the bins that we were doing before. So I'm very happy for it to go to an annual, fixed annual subscription period. That makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is why on earth we'd spend £40,000 on a permit system, because presumably you're just collecting the same bins, and whatever you do with a permit system, whether you have a sticker on it or a non-tamper proof thing, people will find a way of tampering with them, removing the stickers. They'll take a bin from somewhere else and put it at their property. You know, will we start the law of unintended consequences and bin wars? I just think, and because it goes further to say that in time we'll revert to the PDAs. And I thought the PDAs were what we were doing all of this checking of bins with. So it seems like we've moved to a new system with the same bins, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're now going to spend some money to introduce what seems to be a bit of an old-fashioned way of checking. Just my 2 pence worth. Thank you.
Thank you. You make some good points. I don't know if Clive or Jen, if you want to come back.
We both want to come back on that, but firstly on the last point, it's not entirely analogous, but I had a lot of experience with using PDAs as in Royal Mail, and I can tell you now that using the PDAs to check on everything or even a substantial amount is very time consuming. And a postman out on delivery, and it's very similar for refuse collection staff, will spend if they have to consult the PDA regularly, will be spending a lot more time on that collection, and these are time critical jobs. Track mail takes twice as long to deliver, 3 times as long to deliver as untracked mail, and PDAs take 2, 3, 4 times as long if you have to consult them regularly than if you actually can just look with Mark 1 eyeballs. So I'll just make that observation that there are time factors in time is often money. Over to Jane.
I think the assumption would be made that the service under our previous contractor worked well, and it didn't. I've been involved in the garden waste service since its inception, and it has struggled to complete, and it hasn't been delivered successfully across the board since the start. So we're saying now that actually, it's not a new problem, but it's saying that the problems we're having with garden waste, they were exacerbated because of changes of contractor, but they've been there and they've been there a long time. And over the time, for the last 10 years, we haven't removed old garden bins that people stopped paying for. They're out there. And so that's a large amount that has collected. Some years ago, we went to a particular area, and I won't say which area, but we did a brief assessment, and at that point we had at least 10% of bins not paid for. So yes, that's one area, and we have done other snapshots where we've had, I think it mentions in the report, around people do dob in their neighbours because they feel affronted that they're paying their £48 and their neighbours aren't. And when we get those requests, we do a quick look across the whole road, and we have gone out and removed bins, and it's never just one in a road. It's always more than one that we've had to remove, because we'll go in and do that whole sweep of that area. So the problems existed for a long time. The intention is that, yes, the PDAs, if we had just those paying for the bins that are presenting them, the PDAs are perfect because they're looking and they're checking off a positive thing. Yep, those bins are out. What actually happens is they get, particularly in the rural areas where there is more house names, they get a very long list of properties who have subscribed to the service. To spot the maybe 2, maybe 10 bins in that road with house names that aren't on that list is really difficult, particularly as the PDA is generally in the cab with the driver going along. The people putting the bins on the back are at the back of the vehicle, and there's 2 of them. So there's 3 people in that crew, 1 PDA. They're going to get the job done as quickly as they can. If they see a bin, they'll put it on. There are also probably bins where there is the address on, but they've got 2 bins because maybe it got a little bit damaged. They asked for a new one, but the old one didn't get taken away, or they've come across an additional bin. So these things do happen, and this is our point, to be able to say we're going to draw a line and get the system right. So yes, there is the hope that actually it is my intention that if we do this for a couple of years, we bring everything back in line, we have the permits allow the crews on the back of that lorry to see this is a paid for bin. They will then empty it. The others that don't get emptied will hopefully contact us, subscribe to the service and keep then continuing using it. Or they didn't subscribe because they didn't want to pay for the service, and they'll have to take their garden waste to the local household waste recycling centre. So either way, it benefits us that we're only collecting the bins that are paid for. Now, in those 2 years, if all of that, and I'm hoping it's under 10%, but even if we assume it was 10% of bins come out of the system, we can rely on the PDAs, because the PDAs work when it's just those that should be on there that are out there presenting bins. But we've got 30,000 customers out there, and there is that element of, until it's brought under control, I think something that's very visual that also people can see. We've had the annualised part also deals with the fact that residents don't necessarily know when their own renewal's due, and it's until they get the reminder email and maybe miss it. This, everyone know, 30th of is that right? 30th of June will be that cut off. 1st of July, they need their new sticker, and they've paid for it, and they continue. So it will bring everything in line. It'll be very fair. It'll be very open. People will see the bins that have got stickers. They'll present them. There will be a little bit of difficulty in the beginning, I'm sure, when residents genuinely are presenting bins because they've moved into the area, maybe from somewhere that they didn't have to pay for garden waste, or maybe, they assumed there was a bin there, the previous owner had paid for it already. They'll know now if that bin has got that sticker that says this is collected until the 30th of June 2026, as it will be at that point.
Thank you. So basically belt and braces for a couple of years with the potential to review it in the future. That kind of feels reasonable. Can I ask a question of either of you? Currently, the contract for the garden waste basically says there's no guarantee that all bins will be collected. I wonder whether or not that's a little too open-ended, and whether or not we can take this opportunity to say that something like 80% will be collected, 90% will be collected. Not that 10% or so get missed, but just to give our residents a bit of a bit of thought about a bit of confidence that they're not going to never ever get a garden bin, because it could read that they could pay their £40 and not get £53, isn't it, or something? 40, I can't remember, and never get a garden collection. I just wondered if there was a case for putting a de minimis figure in there.
I'll obviously ask for a second opinion, but I don't think there's an issue with the council as a whole having a target in the contract. What could be a problem is if it was ever to be taken as a promise to an individual person within that contract. I mean, that can lead to arguments about,
Thank you. And I'm not asking for this.
But if it's the broader aspiration, I don't think it's a major issue.
I'm not asking for a decision tonight, just that we put it on.
So I think we want to go away and actually look at how that would be done.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Joe.
Certainly. I mean, the wording in there is quite general in the terms and conditions, that we don't guarantee 26 collections per year, but it will only be cancelled in exceptional circumstances and at Christmas. I think we can tighten up that wording and certainly look to put a figure, because I wouldn't be wanting to drop more than a couple of collections over the course of a year anyway. So if you let us go away, work out what we're happy with to put in there, and then come back, if that's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood, then Wales, and then Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. The principle around the arrangements for payments, I'm fairly agnostic on. However, I do come back to the point that I do have some fairly in principle concerns about the Green Waste Service in terms of its sustainability. You are effectively carting around significant energy use, water, which is what most of this vegetation is. And the way that vegetation is treated, the heat it reaches essentially sterilizes anything that lives on that vegetation. So essentially, it's acting as a sink for biodiversity from our gardens, and we have signed up to a biodiversity emergency and declared one. We have declared a nature recovery declaration. I think there are better ways of doing things, and when in the past we used to subsidise home composters, which means you don't have to cart your watery grass cuttings and leaves and vegetation around in a vehicle, and it also provides a habitat, and it doesn't sterilise anything that's living on it. So I think we need to offer that alternative, and I hope that coming forward in the budget for next year, we will actually return to the subsidised composter scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor English, hope you took note of that.
It is an issue that's on the radar. So.
Good. Councillor Wales?
No problem with home composting, except lots of households don't have the facility or the space or the inclination to home compost. And collecting the rubbish or the garden waste in one van is a lot more viable than that number of people taking their cars to their local facility to dump it themselves. My point really is that surely all bin collections are a paid for service, either by the council tax or by the extra money people choose to spend on their garden one. I have a problem with admitting that we're not going to collect all of them, because if people are paying for them, they rather feel that they should be. If we are going to cancel them, then we need to be in a position to be able to refund those 2 lifts or whatever that don't happen, or alternatively, like some boroughs, not run the service during the winter, just have it running 7 months of the year.
Okay. Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Chair. Jan, I think you and I had this discussion before, but I think it's valid. So when we're in the middle of implementation of the new bin contract, we found that some bins were moving by stealth overnight, by magic, from one property to another, and ensure they were being nicked. I wondered whether or not having a stickered bin will make a bin a more highly prized asset and they'll travel around a bit more. But I think you said that the sticker relates to the property, and so there's a mechanism in place to prevent that. Sure. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Certainly the intention is to link it to a road rather than a property, because we didn't necessarily want to make it so specific, but to prevent therefore bins moving, whereas usually you'll find it in your own road. But it means that if a crew are collecting, I think I used an example from Bearsted, and they're collecting in Roseacre Lane and the address says Ware Street, it raises that question of how's it got here. Obviously there'll be the same mechanism we currently have for people who actually move and want to take their garden bins with them. There's always an issue if they move out of the borough, then unfortunately, hopefully they'll just leave it behind for their the person moving in, and it gives that person the chance to say, okay, it runs out at this date, and we can put it in. So yes, there's the intention to do that. But again, as I say, I keep saying we're not moving away from the PDAs. They still are our sort of ultimate guide behind the scenes, and therefore, if the crews have any sort of queries over suddenly bins appearing that weren't there, because one of the real benefits of this is at the moment the crew every month have people joining, have people leaving. They never really know what they're collecting on a monthly basis. Whereas with this, yes, there'll be some people joining, but ultimately the vast majority of people will sit there for the full 12 months, and they will start to see those some bins have moved and it's all strange, and we can get that reported back through the PDAs.
Good, thank you. I've been rustling and the black market in bins going through my head now. So, Councillor English, you've proposed option 1. I think, are you happy to take the notes about composting and consideration of composting and tweaking the contract in line with a de minimis as well? Is there a seconder for that proposal? Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And I can't see anyone else wanting to speak, so are we agreed? Thank you. Okay, item, what number up to? 19, Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan. Councillor Summersgill, this is for you to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. This is a 6-monthly update to the existing Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan, which was adopted 4 years ago now. It should have been an annual review at this stage, but we've decided to postpone this till the next 6-month one in March 2025 to review the strategy, to look at the 5 years that's still to come, and also to align it with the new strategic plan and budget, and the fact that we'll have a new biodiversity and climate change manager in place next month. I had the action plan realigned to new portfolios and cabinet members. We're all consulted in September on that and agreed. And there's a summary of the status of the 38 actions in a table on point 25 in your documents. I don't intend to go into any of the actions in detail unless there's questions on them, but just to recommend that this update is noted, and the new version in 6 months' time will hopefully be a bit less words, and more targeted for things to happen between 2025 and 2030, not all by 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Summersgill. I've got Councillor Thompson and Harwood. Just a couple of thoughts initially from me, and then English. It's good to see that a lot of the actions are progressing, and that there is going to be a revised version. I think we're number 6 in the country with this plan, if it rings a bell. We're quite high up in terms of the scorecard. It would be good to get us to number 1. Not that I'm competitive, just a challenge for you. One of the things I would quite like to see in the next iteration would be the trajectory of carbon impact. So a trajectory graph showing how the action plan will bring us down to 0, rather than simply the actions or how close to zero it will get in case we don't get there. But I'll pass over to Councillor Thompson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to be speedy and succinct. I do have 5 points to make, so I will thank you for your indulgence. Firstly, to note with pleasure that the cross-cutting issues and implications, pages 46 and 47, now do show more specific comments. We've been asking for this, and it's nice to see that in place, particularly under public health and obviously the biodiversity and climate change points themselves. There are still questions about procurement and equalities, but we can look at those again. We note, thank you, Councillor Summers-Gill, for the very good reasons as to why the update has been delayed until next year for good reasons, not least the responsibilities being taken up by the new officer. I'm sure we continue to be very grateful for those that have been here. James Wilderson's been in particular before for the excellent position that we've got to. However, I was personally very scathing about delays in previous years to this plan, and would like to note that there are some points of progress that it would be good to draw attention to, and indeed that there is opportunity for all members and indeed the public to bring forward their suggestions and constructive engagement. They don't need anybody's permission, and I think it's important if folk are listening to this today that they know that we are very much open for partnership. If I can deal with some particular issues, 4.2 on the recycling facilities in the council itself, it is clearly difficult to be green, it would seem. It's harder than it appears. We need proper procedures, fitness for purpose in collection, disposal and delivery of recycling to the right places, and we're still investigating how to do this. I would like to know if we are talking to local councils, especially those who are our shared service partners, for best practice, so that we can have an effective waste collection contract from our estate, where things that are put in the right bins actually arrive in the right places. This is a familiar challenge that we see in other areas of corporate life. Clearly, that's what's difficult here. So I'd like to know what we're doing about that. The involvement of parishes or non-parish wards and the involvement of our parish councillors and ward members, I think, can be highlighted at this point. I would like to know, have parishes been encouraged at this stage to step up to show leadership and partnership with their local communities, to take initiatives in co-creating solutions? We know of the good work done by, for example, Bearsted Can and Maidstone Can. They are very happy to be partners with us in the future. The residents and community at large clearly have much more energy and capacity to accomplish things across the borough than the council has. It's a wonder that we've achieved as much as we have in some respects. At 6.1, I note with pleasure through the leadership of the previous council that we have a B&G standard of 20%. That they are to be praised for that. It is also good to note that next to me and further along the desk there are people with national level leadership in expertise in biodiversity. And again, I would like to know if there is intention for us to actually set out to provide a leading example nationally, not least with regard to the SPDs that we'll be producing under 6.3 for our so-called garden communities. I think there's a leadership role for us to occupy there. At 6.6, you'll see the work with local farms and landowners at landscape scale. Councillor Summers-Gill and I and others, I think, have been at the Making Space for Nature programme through Kent County Council. We have met those involved in the nature recovery strategy, nature-friendly farming, and are looking for farmers and landowners as partners, indeed lead partners, in relationship with Maidstone Borough Council and Kent County Council and the Environment Agency through this initiative. So these things are happening. They are not being waited for. We are not relying on officers to do this, and we invite all partners, particularly those in farming and with connection with landowners, to step up and help facilitate this. Under 8.3, it talks about the role with business. minimising carbon footprints, maximising local supply chains, travel plans, and involvement with Kent Prepare. I can report that the Business Terrace has already held green business workshops. We are now scaling up for wider networking, co-led with local businesses on green business initiatives, and scoping out the potential for an economic development transformation board. And we're seeking partners for that and invite those actively. I agree with Councillor Harwood, finally, that there are other good ideas that don't yet feature on this, and whether it's composting or alternative to carrying around water unnecessarily or such like. We're looking for these ideas, so it would be good to see invitations to partnership actually featuring in this plan, because we can't do everything. I'm sorry if I've gone on too long. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Councillor Saunderson. A couple of points there. Mr. Broom, do you want to come back on the Mason House recycling in particular? And I'll bring you in a second on that one. And in terms of the BNG, I'm sure there's a zero missing from the figure in there. It should be 200%, shouldn't it? At least.
We are aware of the feedback you've given us on other consultations concerning the percentage for BNG. And I think you did throw down a challenge to us, had we noticed and did we think it was a typo? And the answer to those are yes and no. But we are also very much aware of the art of the possible. So far as recycling in Maidstone House is concerned, there is at the moment some limited separation, and some recycling does occur from an officer perspective, as well as obviously from a political perspective. We are keen to improve that and plan to put the necessary arrangements in place as we refurbish the building through our decarbonisation project. So you may find yourself asking the same question and me giving you the same answer until the point at which that project is implemented, but that is currently the plan.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood, then English, then Sunscott.
I will genuinely be brief. I think March 2025, we need to ensure this is a much tougher document with harder targets. And frankly, we are in terrible trouble as a planet and as a borough in terms of both climate change impacts, but also in terms of the ecological catastrophe that we're currently in the midst of. And we're going to need to step up our game and think on a much more landscape scale and a more kind of global scale. And I think it will be quite exciting. And just as an aside, my colleague said that talking about the 20% biodiversity net gain debate, Mr. Edgerton will recall, I spent an awful long time at the hearing jousting with various developer representatives about the 20%, but we did win the argument, and I think that's good. So I think that was a corporate whole council effort and not just one camp. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Yes, the emergency is getting worse and worse. And Spain last night was a year's worth of rainfall in 4 hours. About 2 feet of rain, which was quite scary. Councillor English.
Yes, it's difficult to state or overstate just how bad the situation is, both in terms of climate change and biodiversity. The action plan does need to be stronger and more robust. Not that the existing document was poor compared with our other local authorities, but the bar in a way was quite low. So being 6 in 300 on a relatively low bar is perhaps not that good even compared to the 150 out of 300 if the bar had been higher in absolute terms. So we can do better, but the important thing is not just to wait until the plan is written, but to take those actions that we are able to take. Councillor Thompson and others have already mentioned some of the things that are being done, and from small things like rolling out a pilot for the Miriaki hedge planting scheme, which is a Japanese concept of replanting hard to use, difficult areas to plant, and looking for sites for biodiversity net gain ourselves, taking what actions we can as a council now is important too, because even small steps can, in aggregate, add up to quite substantial things. And this is what we have to get over to the public. There's a perception amongst the public that this is such a huge thing that they can't do anything. But small steps taken by enough people actually amount to quite a lot of impact. So we need to get across to the public, parish councils and individual members of the public and residents association, that we can all do a small part. And councillors in particular have a responsibility to pay their, whether it's borough councillors or parishes. And there's a genuine appetite amongst the more progressive parishes, which is roughly about half of those in Maidstone, the more proactive, perhaps is the right term, rather than progressive, proactive engagement. And I hope that the rest will come along and be more proactive if they see their neighbouring parishes doing things, particularly encouraging parishes like Bearsted, for example, to work. We get in places like Banky Meadow, designated a local nature reserve, which could be done very, very quickly. These sort of projects, bringing forward a good management plan for that should be relatively simple. So these sort of, it isn't going to impact the planet, but it will impact Bearsted quite substantially. And if you impact enough parishes and non-parished areas that way, then we will make a difference. I mean, just a small thing. I was looking at the neighbourhood sewer mount for High Street Ward. It's £113,000. There's an awful lot of small improvements that could be done with £113,000 if we are able to engage the community. We've already got 3 projects going forward in the community, but we could have 20 or 30 across the town centre wards, bringing forward biodiversity on a smallish scale, like the Family Wildlife Project have done separately and independently, and we can make a real difference. I think it's important that we do that, not just waiting for the plan, but that we do that now and show that to people that individual actions and collective actions can make a difference, because I've got a feeling, Mr. Chairman, there is a climate, pun intended, of despair and a feeling we just can't do anything because it's too big a problem.
Thank you. Yes, there is clearly an issue of despair, but we have to work hard and mitigate. Just to pick you up on and to remind Councillor Summersgill, clearly there are 2 parts to these actions. One is what it does to the council operations. The other is under our direct control, even scopes 1 to 3 under our control, and the other is how we influence the rest of the borough in terms of policy. So making sure that we're clear in the new plan where those actions lie is going to be key. Councillor Summersgill, you indicated.
Thank you. Just a few points of elaboration and questions made. What I neglected to mention is that I intend to talk cross-politically when I'm putting the next stage together. I've already raised a question with 2 of the other parties' members so that we get feed-in from everybody in the council. The aspect about parishes stepping up to the point, having just been chair of the Parish Council Environment Network, I can inform that they are particularly avid. We are commencing plastic-free initiative in Marden next week, which Bearsted can have already started in Bearsted. Just to note that Bearsted Can are not parish-led. The parish don't tend to be involved in that one. And we are looking for BNG net gain sites. In fact, last week we were looking at a substantial 2-kilometre long riverside site being evaluated for potential large-scale BNG. So these things are going on, and I'm investigating 6 Maidstone Borough Council sites at the moment instead of the 2 that were first put forward. And yes, we are talking to farmers, landowners and businessmen as well, trying to pass initiatives on and learn from them.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood.
As an aside, Councillor English raised the Miyawaki woodlands, which I think are really interesting because Dr. Akira Miyawaki developed his quite revolutionary approach to establishing woodland on degraded sites. And that wasn't all about just getting more trees into communities. It was actually about creating resilient towns and cities, and it was actually to protect buildings and urban conurbations from cyclone impacts. And interestingly, today, Parks colleagues and colleagues from County Council agreed 2 more trial plots in Maidstone Borough, which will be 100% funded by DEFRA. And you know, for a town as flood vulnerable as we are, and where storm impacts and so on can be quite significant, I think we do need to really embrace new thinking in terms of sustainability, and I think we are in the vanguard through our support of the work on the Miyawaki woodlands.
Thank you. Yeah, adaptation is clearly becoming incredibly important and therefore needs to feature, and the nature-based solutions in particular are important. You talk about being at the vanguard. I believe we've got the largest training camp for retrofit as well in Maidstone, which is really positive. So we are doing some good stuff. Councillor Summerskill.
Just to add to Councillor Harwood's point, I spent this afternoon at Milton Creek Country Park in Sittingbourne, which is a marvellous green lung in the middle of a complete industrial area, and it was wonderful to see how fast the trees have grown there in very poor ground without the Miyawaki principle.
Thank you. Okay, so the papers suggest that we need to agree to carry on 6 monthly updates. Obviously, with all the comments noted and Councillor Summerskill's approach to having a significant review of the plan over the coming months when the new climate officer is here. So are we agreed on that? Excellent, agreed. Good. Okay, final paper, that's item 20. This is the supplementary planning documents providing flexibility to stakeholder steering groups. I'm not sure, it obviously sits under you, Councillor Harwood. Do you want to introduce it, or shall I pass it straight over to Mr. Edgerton?
I think we'll just introduce it, and actually the recommendation involves your good self.
Thank you. Mr. Edgerton, did you want to say anything on this paper?
There isn't really a huge amount to say, Chairman. It is simply the fact that we wish to provide flexibility now, having fully considered the stakeholder steering groups for the 3 strategic supplementary planning documents, and an opportunity has arisen with this Cabinet for us to give us consideration to that, and a mechanism is proposed to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, I saw you indicating a second ago.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say how very much I appreciate the efforts made, I believe, by yourself and Officer Karen Britton and indeed Mr. Edgerton and others in bringing this item back for our attention today. Colleagues are content, very content with the flexibilities that have been offered. There's clearly a great deal to be discussed in consultation with officers about what the details of that look like. But this is a great improvement, and I propose that we pass this as per the papers. Thank you.
Okay, so there are two options. I'm assuming you're proposing option A rather than option B. Let me just check.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Excellent. Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Just to echo Councillor Thompson's comments, and we all know these are complex issues, and we've seen the draft paper that shows how broad the stakeholder groups are. So getting the framework right to make sure those forums are functional and do the best job is really important. So I'm happy with option A, that we'll be able to adjust them as needed to make that happen.
Thank you. See no one else indicating, proposed by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor English. Are we agreed on option A? Agreed. Excellent. That concludes the business. Okay, Councillor Nagy.
Yeah, I was too late in the last meeting. I did raise a question about the solar panels a couple of meetings ago. Does it affect, how does it affect the insurance on our premises? If any, do we gain or do we lose?
So I believe Councillor Summerskill gave an answer to that. Perhaps Councillor Summerskill, you could provide Councillor Nagy the answer outside of the meeting, or if you want to inside the meeting, I don't mind.
My answer wasn't on insurances.
Sorry?
My answer was not on insurance.
Wasn't it? Okay, I've misremembered. Okay, so Councillor
My
Nagy,
question arose because obviously the fire up Tunbridge Road was solar panels. That's
okay,
all
that's
it
fine.
was.
So we'll get an answer for you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you.